This story has been simmering for a long time. It erupted after India today picked it up a week before the election results had come out. We've stayed with the story even after asking question after question, bringing on expert after expert. And that is one of the reasons, not all the reason, but one of the reasons why the story has assumed the kind of proportions it has at this point of time. And even now, here are the questions that don't have answers just yet that I am asking on a day when the Supreme Court has issued notice to the government and the National Testing Agency. Number one, have paper leaks contaminated the NEET and the entrance exam system in general? And I'll go into that in deeper detail in just a bit. Number two, does the government need to make a bigger move to assure students? So far, the government has been reactive. They've been incremental, they've been piecemeal, and those assurances are not cutting ice with the students. Does it need something bigger? Will the NEET 2024 exam be reconducted? Will it have to be conducted afresh? Is that the only thing left to do? Number four, could the Prime Minister address students and assure action? Remember, the Prime Minister has never been averse to interacting with students. He holds his exam master class before exams. He has a very good connect with youth and with students. Will the Prime Minister recognize this as an issue that requires his attention and speak to students of NEET and by extension to students all across the country? And finally, has the National Testing Agency lost any authority to investigate the very lapses it is being blamed of overseeing? Joining me live on this story, Milan Sharma, who tracks education for us. Nidhi Taneja of News Tak has also been looking at all developments on this story very closely. But Milan, to you first. The Supreme Court has issued notice once again, this time to the Centre and the National Testing Agency, a very evocative comment saying even if there is 0.001% negligence, that is unacceptable. This comes on the back of, the stench of a paper leak in at least one place. We do know an investigation is happening there, and the heat over the possibility of malpractice in NEET has only risen. I'm not talking about the politics. The politicians, of course, will all jump into it once they see students hitting the streets. But this has now taken on a kind of organic form of its own, and questions need to be answered now.
Well, Shiv, certainly because, with the Supreme Court there, listening to a batch of petitions that are coming forward and, the big crucial hearing is going to happen on July 8th also. But as and when layers are being opened, it's being understood by the Supreme Court's honorable judges as well that even if there is a 0.1 or 0.001% chance of laxity or there are lapses, then the NTA should perhaps step forward and admit to those, because earlier we saw how the government and the NTA was adamant that there has been no paper leak whatsoever. But, the case registered, especially in the case of Bihar and students who have been summoned, the FIR that has been registered clearly points out to a malpractice that has happened. Now, the NTA may say that these were cheating attempts or these were attempts at cheating that was stopped by the authorities, but the point still remains that if there is even a small sliver chance of a leak, that really mars the confidence of the students who are giving the papers and also the people who will see these students become doctors. Imagine you and I being treated by the toppers of NEET, and how do we understand what their capability and credibility is, which is being questioned by all and sundry today. So that is the crucial question, Shiv, because NEET students are tomorrow's doctors. They are tomorrow's lifesavers. It's a very important question on a humanitarian level as well, politics aside. And this is why what remains for NTA to do is also carry out investigations, perhaps give evidences to the police to the effect that there have been leaks, and perhaps look at conducting a retest for some portion of the students, which has perhaps been the demand of many students at the moment, Shiv.
Okay, very interesting. So will there be a limited retest? Could there be a bigger kind of decision? We don't know just yet. But the proof of the matter will only be if that the NTA can answer every question that is thrown at it in a bulletproof way. That's what the Supreme Court has basically said. Even if there is a possibility of 0.001% negligence, that is unacceptable when you are talking about the future of students. Nidhi, we've been putting the spotlight on this story for over 14 days now. You've been looking at it, you and Milan have been looking at it for longer. But Nidhi, now it's come to a point where, notices are being issued by the Supreme Court. The NTA, has a committee that is looking into malpractice allegations. Dharmendra Pradhan, the education minister, has made a series of different comments. He's also under attack at this point of time, and understandably so. But we also need to start talking about specific solutions. Is there, are any specific ideas emerging from experts, from advisors on how this entire mess can now be solved?
Shiv, so far, forensic and technical audit, because the extent of alleged irregularities that are being talked about, it's not just one thing. It's not just about the grace marks. The entire sanctity of the exam seems to be affected. And the Supreme Court itself said that in the first hearing and today itself. It lashed out at the NTA, but however, students now are hopeless. If anything, they are placing hopes on the Supreme Court right now. I didn't think so. The way NTA has reacted, the way Education Minister has reacted, the way government has been reacting on it, students are very hopeful of the government. I don't think so. They are hopeful of the Supreme Court, that the Supreme Court would take a call on that, direct the NTA to reconduct exams. And another thing, Maheshwar Perry, who was on our show the other day, he has been of the view that there should be forensic and technical audit of the examination, because these are not just 6 exam centers that are affected. We need to know about the larger picture that we maybe cannot see right now, because there might be many other exam centers affected, and there may be many others that Milan was also talking about.
Yes.
We don't want any risk with our healthcare system in the future, for sure.
Very interesting. So the fact that the politics has now become a kind of inextricable part of it, is something that has been foreseen. Obviously, you've seen protests taking place. The Aam Aadmi Party has protested in Delhi. Rahul Gandhi made a mention over why the government leadership and the Prime Minister haven't spoken about this. But the politics of it is separate, because ultimately, at the end of the day, the NTA and the government have to take a decision in student interest and not because of any kind of political compulsions or political pressure. This has to be, and I repeat this over and over again, it has to be student first. It has to be about the interest of students. Stay with me, Milan and Nidhi. I want to summarize for our viewers just a collation of some of the possible solutions. Nidhi and Milan both mentioned some of these. Fulfilling the students' demand for a re-examination. Whether this is going to be a total re-examination under NEET or a limited re-examination of a certain section of the students, we don't know just yet, but could that be one of the solutions? A thorough investigation into the paper leak allegation, like Nidhi was mentioning, a kind of forensic audit into paper leaks, because even if a slight bit of malpractice or paper leak has taken place, the entire house of cards that is NEET basically falls apart. The merit system goes straight out of the window, because that's how few people make it through NEET to get into these big institutions. Investigation into how 67 toppers got the full 720 marks. An explanation has been put forward about a certain precedent of a previous examination through which certain grace marks were allowed. But how was the actual process completed? The complete removal of grace marks from NEET is an announcement that was made by the NTA recently, where they would remove those marks and give a certain section of students, about 1,536 students, the chance or the opportunity to take a retest, or a formula for giving grace marks should be made public. So far, as Milan had told us earlier, there is an earlier precedent and a formula which was used for this particular grace marks, but that appears not to have cut ice, at least so far, with the student community that is leading these protests. So Milan, that leads to my next question now. The Supreme Court has issued notice. The National Testing Agency is the nodal body that is under the spotlight right now. They themselves are conducting an inquiry. That itself has come under quite a bit of scrutiny, because it seems to be the agency that is under scrutiny conducting its own investigation into the allegations against the same agency. That appears to be a huge conflict of interest. how is it that this is not something that's being talked about more, Milan?
Well, Shiv, definitely, because one of the chairmen of the NTA, in fact, Professor Pradeep, is the one who's also part of this high-powered committee. The members of the high-powered committee that we had access through an exclusive court report. Happened to be the same person who's also the NTA chairman, and that really points out questions to the fact that it is a conflict of interest. But having said that, even if a high-powered committee has been created, they were supposed to come up with more recommendations. Their earliest recommendations have been the 1563 students should not get grace marks. We also recall that 23rd of June is when a retest for these students will also take place. That's an option that has been given to them. And with the NTA saying that 6th July is when the counselling will also be done. But the real question again is whether the government is ready to fully bite the bullet on the NEET paper leak allegations, and whether they can come forward with some sort of evidences given to them by the centers, or them collecting evidences from the centers, because there are many centers in India as well as outside the country that were conducting the NEET examinations. And if, the NTA says that everything was hunky-dory and there were only perhaps some cheating attempts or impersonation attempts, then there was a burnt paper that was found in Bihar. What sort of questions, are answered behind that? And apart from that, the high-powered committee must also take into consideration the time lost at all centers. The NTA says that only some centers lost time. But it seems like there are more students who are left out of the loop, more than 1,563, that would come forward as and when, the Supreme Court hearings will continue. Because remember, not every student has gone with a batch of petitions to the Supreme Court. There are many in rural areas. There are many in states and interior lands who have not got the chance and the wherewithal to file a case and fight it out.
Okay. Nidhi, final question to you. Is there a kind of daily dialogue that is taking place between the students and the NTA, or the authorities? Because, this is playing out in a big way here on India Today and parts of the media as well. But is there some kind of organic dialogue that's taking place?
No, Shiv, I don't think so. Because I don't see any, any channel that the NTA has opened for students to, to have a conversation, to come out clear. And in the first place, NTA should come out clean in the sense that the Supreme Court has also directed or observed today that the NTA should first take ownership, first take responsibility of the fact that yes, a certain thing or many things have gone wrong, and we take responsibility and we will rectify it. So none of those things are happening right now. And the question that you asked, I don't think so there's any channel, any medium of communication really happening between students and the NTA. But it would be great if the NTA or the government opens channels of communication with the students.
Okay.
And I would like to refer the CLAT judgment, the old CLAT judgment that the NTA had referred in terms of giving and awarding grace marks to students. Back then, the CLAT conducting body had opened a new portal for many students who could not approach courts. This time around, none of that has happened.
Okay, so obviously a lot to think about and a lot to learn from this entire fiasco, and it's still not over, but we'll keep a track of it. Thanks as always, Nidhi and Milan, for joining me on the story and taking that forward.